Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Layman's Law School. I am Chase Hawk. I am joined today by my esteemed colleagues and friends, Tianna Bias and Shawn Merslack. This is Layman's Law School, where we try to explain in layman's terms some of the things that are going on in the legal world that are in the news, and hopefully inform you and give you some insight as to what you're seeing explained on the news, but in terms that doesn't include legalese. But
we try to. And normally it's, two or three Southern gentlemen. Today we have two Southern gentlemen.
That's
and Southern gentlewoman, Tianna Bias, are one of our hardest working attorneys at the Hawk Law Group.
Absolutely talented. And like I said, beautiful Southern belle and extremely capable. I am so glad that we hired her so I don't ever have to be on the other side. But today we're going to be talking about Shawn P. Diddy Combs. And because
Diddy, Puff Daddy.
That's right.
But before we do that, we're going to celebrate Friday.
All right.
Reed's not here, so we're not drinking Bud Light. But I have
man.
brought a delicious beverage from
Awesome.
Augusta, Georgia itself. Dirty Girl
Vodka
Rita,
my
made
goodness.
right down the street here.
Nice.
Vodka Rita. Yeah. Vodka Rita. Made here in Augusta,
Rita.
Georgia.
Cheers to another good week.
Pop that for me. I don't want to break my nail.
Oh, we can't break
Sorry.
it now.
And I told you, Southern gentleman.
Thank
There
you.
we go.
Very well. Well, for those of that you hadn't heard, Shawn Puff Daddy Combs is gaining some notoriety for a different reason. And it started back some time ago.
Yeah, a few months ago.
Yeah, when, Cassie
Yeah, November of last
Ventura,
year.
yeah, started her allegation. And I think her case was settled the day after the complaint
about
was
24
filed.
hours.
Yeah. And that began kind of an avalanche of other lawsuits that were filed, civil lawsuits for sexual harassment, sexual assault, with a variety of other claims. But the one that has kind of really made a big splash is one that was filed by Rodney Jones. He's a music producer that was working on behalf of Shawn Combs. And in that complaint, he alleges sexual assault, sexual harassment, racketeering, influence, and corrupt organization act violations, or RICO. This is the same thing that they actually pursue mafia members for. Unsolicited groping and touching. Oh, that's the sexual harassment. But negligent infliction of emotional distress and workplace harassment, as well as unjust enrichment. And today what I think we should do is just talk to the public about, first of all, because they're seeing that his houses are getting raided, and it came from a lawsuit from a guy suing him for money, right?
Why are the feds involved?
Yeah, all that stuff. Yeah, how does someone suing somebody for money turn into a raid on somebody's house? So if you could, Tianna, if you could talk to the viewers a little bit about the difference between civil law and criminal law.
Okay, so when we first saw the accusations come out in Cassie's civil suit last November, obviously a lot of people were surprised to see that it resolved so quickly.
And who was Cassie?
So Cassie is an R&B singer. She was in a relationship with Diddy for about a decade.
Girlfriend.
Yes.
Okay.
And you may know her a few years into the relationship. She shaved the side of her head. That was trendy. I look too much like my dad, so I didn't engage in that trend, but it was a very popular hairstyle. That case resolved very quickly. A lot of people were surprised and would say, oh, that must mean he's guilty. He tried to get it wrapped up. But he also has a very experienced lawyer who advised him that he has a lot of assets that could be exposed by this, so he wrapped that up very quickly with the hopes that he would not be where he is today, I assume. And so once she raised those allegations, obviously that starts giving probable cause to law enforcement to look into whether or not there was criminal activity. A lot of times people think that because there's a civil suit, that means that there isn't a criminal activity that could be going on in the background, but there could be both, which is what we're seeing here.
Yeah, I was on a more incredibly thorough professional answer, but this is the layman's law.
Okay. Let's tone it down.
What I was asking is, what is civil law and what is criminal law? And
okay,
what
so
is
you don't even want to get Diddy
yeah,
in it. Yeah,
what
okay,
is the
so
difference
civil law,
between the two?
The way to remember it if you're not an attorney is that civil law is anything that's not criminal. Criminal law is anything that could keep you from being a free person. It could lead to jail time. So civil actions are things that go after your money. They go after things that don't involve you potentially going to prison. Criminal law does. And so that's pretty much the difference, and that's the easiest way to remember it.
Yeah, and Shawn, you were a police officer for a number of years, right? And how is it that like factual allegations that are in the complaint of a civil lawsuit? So he's suing him for $30 million for unjust enrichment, sexual harassment, all this other stuff. How does that turn into a criminal case? Because I think the public is a little bit worried. It's like, oh my gosh, this guy was operating like a mafioso, was trafficking women, was engaged in sex with minors, doing all these drugs and stuff like that. Where's the police in all this? I mean,
I would say a lot of times it's going to be strategic on the part of the civil attorneys bringing it. They're going to feed information to the appropriate authorities when they see, number one, they're pursuing a civil case for their client, but there may be criminal aspects of this person that committed criminal acts. So they may be feeding information to the investigators, or if it's later on in the litigation, they may, through the discovery process, uncover text messages, videos, photos, things of that nature that they could then turn over to the investigators. So when they have this sworn affidavit and complaint, from their client, and they provide that information to any, federal law enforcement agency and have some credible evidence to maybe back up some of it, that gives what's called probable cause. Probable cause is just a low legal standard that means the average person, reasonable person, would come to the conclusion that based on what they're reading or viewing or hearing, this person probably did something. Once that's established, that's the standard for an arrest warrant, or that's the standard to obtain a search warrant so that the police can go and seek other evidence.
Yeah, and given the nature of the allegations, it's I think that Homeland Security is actually involved. Do y'all know why it's Homeland Security and not FBI? Or because I was intrigued to find this out.
I don't know why, but I know what the Homeland Security Investigations Department does, and most of that stuff has to do with actual immigration or some type of a crime that involved the importation or exportation of a person in order to facilitate whatever the crime was.
And so obviously a lot of talk has been had about whether or not he was engaged in sex trafficking. So that would have triggered Homeland Security to probably get involved in the investigation. And also with them mentioning different types of drugs being brought in and out of various locations, Homeland Security could sometimes get involved to see whether or not people were being used to bring in drugs, whether or not they were mules, whether or not these drugs were coming from across the border. And that would also bring in some other agencies that we can talk about later.
Yeah, the Homeland Security gets involved when you start moving, especially minors across the border, or you start moving, I want to say border between states, borders between countries. And he owns several homes in the Virgin Islands. He owns homes in Miami and other states. And what's alleged in this complaint is that Rodney Jones was actually almost like a courier for drugs and procuring sex workers. Often these sex workers were underage. And I have the complaint here. And for those of you who don't know, most of these documents are public documents, okay? Unless they are they're involved in, issues with a minor, right? And even those are often available to the public unless they're sealed by the court. And so Rodney Jones's complaint is 73 pages long. It's very, very detailed. And I had never seen one before I did it, but I started including pictures in my complaints, right, in order to because I thought it was appropriate. And there's a lot of pictures in this complaint, but I want to put that up on the screen and kind of go through with the viewers and talk about what we're seeing here, to just explain that what this is and how it works. To start off with, a complaint is the beginning of a civil lawsuit, and basically it says, look, court, we have an issue between these people and these people, and we have tried to resolve this out. It's between ourselves, and we cannot do it we cannot come to an agreement, and we need the court to oversee the exchange of documents, and we need to have the power of the court to exchange the documents, pictures, whatever evidence, right, that we think will prove our case. And then you file this complaint, and what you have to do is allege all the facts that are the basis. In other words, just if you're saying someone, ran the red light and caused a car accident, and because of that, they owe you money for property damage and your injuries, right? You have to allege, I was there on this date. I was driving south on this road. I had the green light. I have 3 witnesses that saw the same thing. This person ran the red light. Here's the, and you have to explain all those things. And what we're looking at here is the first part of it. And what are we looking at here, Shawn?
This is just the case caption, the front page, the number one or the first page of a complaint, or a lawsuit. It just has the title of the court that it is filed in, the civil action number, case number for it, and it has the parties. We have a plaintiff, Rodney Jones, and then we have the different defendants, including Sean Combs and looks like someone else that's related
his
to
son,
Justin Combs, and a bunch of other people. And obviously then you throw in the other people with big pockets, Motown Records, Universal Music Group, anybody that could have liability or potential liability in these particular claims, or who assisted or had knowledge of them and didn't do anything about the wrongs that were being done.
Right. And I think what's important to explain to the people here is, first of all, the selection of the jurisdiction is always going to be important. Okay, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But in particular, the defendants here. Why are we listing so many defendants?
Well, you have to remember that a lot of times in civil actions, the motivation is for you to get reimbursed or compensated financially. So even though Sean Combs has a lot of money, he's a multimillionaire, you don't want to preclude yourself from getting access to any other assets he may have by way of his record companies, by way of any of the actions that they're saying that his son Justin was involved in. And he has a number of different enterprises, and they're probably going to allege that he obviously shifts his money around. He's a very smart guy financially, so he's never going to have everything under his name alone. And so their attorney wants to try to make sure they include any and everybody possible.
Right, and when you begin these things, you don't necessarily know what you're going to get back when you ask for evidence, right?
Sure.
And as you go through that discovery process, you might learn that somebody else might actually be pulling all these strings, and they're the ones that are primarily responsible. And you don't want to leave them off when you have a statute of limitations to bring them into the case. So if you hadn't filed a case against Motown Records, by this date, then your case is gone. And then all the evidence shows that it's Motown that's mostly responsible. Not necessarily going to happen in this case, but that's why that's happening. If we could scroll down to the next one. Yeah, and trigger warning. Okay, some of the stuff we're talking about, we've already gone into it, is about sexual harassment, involves minors. So if this is the kind of stuff that triggers you, bothers you, please, there's other things you can do with your time. But these are the things that we're going to be.
But if you're listening to us on Apple Podcast or any of the other places that we're available, you can keep listening because you're not going to have to see any of it.
Yeah. Well, we have here a section called jurisdiction and venue. Why is that important?
So usually from the civil perspective, they want to make sure that, one, they're suing in the appropriate place. They have to have personal jurisdiction over Sean to say that he was someone who could be brought to court and be sued in New York, as well as to allege that some of these transactions occurred in New York, even if they were across different state lines. This might also be a very friendly venue for the plaintiff. And so some of it is strategy, some of it is that legally they're required to sue him in this state based on what they're putting in their complaint.
Yeah. So in layman's terms, what that means is there's a couple of things. One, that there's a practical element to the law. Basically says it's not really fair for somebody to, I'm living in Georgia and somebody just says, Chase hit me in Augusta, right? But I want to sue him in Colorado, right?
Sure.
Well, just because of the cost and the effort, and a lot of these rules and laws were made a long time ago, and even now it would be difficult, right, to go through that. And so it's not fair to me if you're going to sue me and ask me for money to sue me in a place that's going to be incredibly difficult for me to pursue it. The other thing is that each one of these the states have a rights. Like if you're engaged in this kind of conduct where you're hurting my citizens, right? they have a state interest. The state has an interest in actually saying, we want to determine how justice is done here.
And we're gonna determine it by our laws because this
yeah.
is where it happened.
Yeah, each state has a certain variation of different laws that apply in different cases. And like you said, there's some lawyering going on here, and then picking in this particular jurisdiction for sure. But then they have a listing of the parties. You can scroll down. They list out all the parties, and they put pictures in. I'm not sure if they were really, important here. Keep going. And then they give what they call a summary of events. And this is a little bit of an unusual step in this particular complaint, but given the overarching nature of the allegations here, and the fact that there are so many causes of action and the complicated parts of it, it makes sense to me. Where he explains in the summary of events that their relationship, how it started, when it started, how much time he spent with him, what he was doing, and then basically a summary of what they're going to allege. Keep going. And then they begin to describe the individual allegations of all this conduct. Now, what is the importance of an allegation when it comes to what is an allegation? What is the importance in when it comes to a complaint?
So, with regard to the allegation itself, is basically where you are telling someone what you're saying that they did to you, or what you would have to prove if for some reason you weren't able to settle it out of court. You just talked about fairness with regard to making sure you're not pulled into Colorado. It's also not fair to you if you didn't know what someone is saying that you did, because you don't know what to defend yourself against. I can't just say Chace did something wrong to me in Georgia and now I want to bring him to court. I have to specify what things I think he did that were inappropriate or wrong and where those things occurred, so that the defendant in this case would be Mr. Combs, as well as the rest of his staff, family members, and other entities, know exactly what it is that they have to defend themselves against.
Right. And he lists out here a whole, we've described it before, him engaging in sex acts with minors, him recording sex acts with minors, drugging and sexually assaulting women, sexually assaulting Mr. Jones, allowing and supporting the sexual assault engaged by others, including actor Cuba Gooding Jr. My goodness. And basically he's alleging all these violations of state and federal law. And the importance of this is you have to actually plead this. In other words, basically state these allegations in such a way that it actually supports each one of your causes of action.
Sure. And when we say causes of action, to relate it to crimes, a cause of action is the actual legal wrong that the, whatever state recognizes, whether it's a tort or, something like that. So think about it as a crime, and a crime has certain elements that have to be met in order to prove somebody committed this particular crime. When you have a civil action, whether it be for negligence or for, sexual harassment, there are elements to this particular civil action, and you have to lay out the groundwork of the facts that support each of those elements.
Right. So, like the elements for sexual assault and harassment, it's non-consensual conduct. The plaintiff must show that the defendant made an unwanted sexual conduct. He's alleging here that Combs, he was basically sexually assaulted. He didn't want the advances of Mr. Combs, and he was touched in that way. And then awareness or recklessness of the defendant's conduct, that he knew or should have known that was unwanted, and he did it anyway. Okay, and that the plaintiff suffered harm, and so that's what you're seeing here is that all these allegations of that particular event happening. Go to the next.
And Mr. Jones, he's an adult, correct? I mean, he
is an adult.
He's some type of producer.
He is a producer, and what's been sort of alleged here is that he was Shawn was leveraging his.
Sean Combs,
Sean
not
Combs.
to be
Sean
confused with Sean
Yeah,
Merslak.
so I mean, this
Thank
is
you.
chickens coming home to roost. I mean, there was a time when all this stuff could be kept quiet, but you saw it with Harvey Weinstein. These people that have become incredibly powerful in the industry and have a lot of influence, and they can make or break your entire life by a whim, and they leverage that power illegally, and that's what's going on here. What you're seeing here in this page, this is page 10 of the complaint. Allegations it looks like 44, 45. He starts to actually talk about some of the
Violence.
some of the violence that occurred and some of the unsafe work environment issues that were brought up, and it relates to a shooting that occurred, and then apparently it's alleged that Combs either did it or his son did it, and he was asked to basically lie to the police to cover this particular incident up. And so what he's doing here, why is this relevant to all the other stuff he's talking about? Because he's talking about a federal RICO case, right? And what this is establishing is this person was engaged in a regular course of illegal conduct, and he was using sophisticated means in which to accomplish that. And this is an example of what that is. On the right there on page 11, you're seeing the actual blood that was basically the scene where the victim was in the bathroom of that particular studio, and it's alleged that shooting occurred in that studio. And
so this also ties into the emotional distress aspect of the complaint that you talked about earlier, because Mr. Jones said that he had to perform life-saving measures, and he was very traumatized by seeing the blood pouring out, other people standing around not rendering aid. And so outside of just the RICO, which is where he's saying that this was being done under the guise of him being a music producer, but actually he was using his title and his status and his organization to commit crimes that were either violent in nature, sexual in nature, or just about anything in between. But he's also talking about how it impacted him on a personal level.
So we'll move on to the next one here, if we could. All right. So now this is getting into the meat of the actual sexual assault and sexual harassment charges. He alleges in this portion of the complaint, page 12 and 13, a myriad of sexual harassment, sexual assault. Most of it involves groping of unconsented to groping of Mr. Jones, and basically forcing him to engage in watching, it looks as if, homosexual activity. Now, here's the thing. I have been around friends, and they've showed me inappropriate things from time to time or whatever. That's one thing. But to be in a position of power and to be in a position as an employer of a person, and then insisting, and first of all, them touching you, them messing with you. I've had friends, messing around with me and stuff like that. That's fine. Just guys, being guys, punching each other, hitting, unconsented to touching, fine, right? But in showing me pictures, I'm not necessarily interested in. But in this case, the actual relationship between the two is what causes the problem. Because when you're in a position of power and you wield that power in a way that's very, very harmful, this is the type of action that you can actually bring. But this is some more of the salacious stuff. Apparently, there's an allegation that Stevie J, one of the producers and of the Love album, was engaged. He was forced to watch a gay sex act that
so this portion of the complaint is where he's alleging that Sean Combs or P. Diddy tried to groom him. And so he talks about he obviously wasn't comfortable engaging in homosexual activities, but P. Diddy knew that he looked up to Stevie J, which is a very popular producer. He also was on Love and Hip Hop Atlanta. And so in order to make Mr. Jones feel more comfortable with the behavior, he's saying that P. Diddy showed him videos of Stevie J allegedly engaging in the same behavior to show him that, hey, everybody's doing this. There are other people who you look up to who are doing it, to try to get him to consent to it, which is why when Shawn asked about whether or not he was an adult, obviously, even if you are an adult, there can still be issues with consent, and that's what goes back to their relationship as employer, employee, and whether or not, even if he did choose to engage in things, whether or not he did it consensually, or if he just felt pressured or put in a position where he couldn't say no.
I guess I'm just confused with like the hierarchy of all this. I mean, I know that P. Diddy has tons of money and everything, but I always thought about it, if I was a producer of music, that the artists like P. Diddy were working for me, as in I was producing their music.
Yeah.
Or they were paying me to produce their music.
Yeah.
You know, not that P. Diddy was my boss, and but obviously this relationship was different because he lived in his houses with him, and stuff like that.
And so in this situation, Diddy was actually the artist because Jones is producing his Love album, which came out right around the time of the allegations that were brought forth by Cassie. So Diddy is a very intense artist from what I've learned about him. Some artists will have you produce an album and they want you to eat, sleep, breathe their whole lifestyle because they want to make sure that you reflect who they are as a person in their music. And so that's why they were living together. He was going on trips with him, going to yachts. And for someone like Diddy, that's not an uncommon experience where they want you to do everything that they do. And so he was working for Combs because basically you have to drop all of your other artists when you're working with someone like P. Diddy because you aren't making any other money because he's paying you so much to do this for him.
Yeah, and so trying just to explain, so from what I understand about the hierarchy of this arrangement, right, is that, Shawn is a little bit unusual in that he is so wealthy and he's an artist and he is trying to work with producers. Like, producers in the music industry are super sought after. Scott Storch,
Kanye West was very popular. The Dream.
Kanye West. I don't know why I'm blanking. Timberland,
Missy Elliott.
Missy. All these people that actually make the beats, and these are the people that really kind of have.
Those are producers or artists?
Musical producers, right?
Okay.
These and some of them are both. Some of them are
like
both.
Timberland,
right.
Missy Elliott.
But here's the thing: it's like, honestly, I feel like if I were to pay 4 of those people we just mentioned, right, and give you 6 months of training, they could probably put you on the charts pretty easily, right? And so Puff recognized talent.
Let's see how much Shiba Inu it takes to get them involved, and we'll see where I can go.
I'm just saying. So I think Puff Daddy recognized some talent in the guy, right? And then basically used his services, because one of the claims is unjust enrichment. And that is basically a claim that you provided something to someone else, right? And they were enriched by it, and then you did not receive anything in return, and that was part of the contract.
Sure.
That's essentially what happened. And so he provided services, producing the Love album, and he was never paid for it. So that's part of the basis of this actual lawsuit. But we're going to have to stop here, and we're going to get into it next time again, and we're going to start talking about how much he's actually how he's
and I'm just very interested in seeing a lot more of this, because it's all the complaint is pretty damning. The fact that whatever the complaint and other complaints and evidence that Homeland Security had and federal law enforcement had was enough to for them to do simultaneous raids at three different houses, stop Sean Combs at the airport as he was leaving to go to Bahamas just to take his phones and electronic devices and stuff. So either there was some sufficient probable cause and nothing's going to come of it, or it's like people are saying this is another Harvey Weinstein type thing, or Jeffrey Epstein type thing.
Yeah. Well, just remember that he's innocent until proven guilty. I know a lot of times when we have, especially when you're in the court of public opinion, everyone says like, oh, he had to do all these things. All of these victims can't be lying. And so it's a very uphill battle that P. Diddy has to climb, because everyone's going to assume that everything that's being brought against him, whether it's civilly or criminally, is true. And so that's very difficult.
And very rarely do we ever hear about what usually there's non-disclosure agreements involved in these settlements of lawsuits and things. So somebody settles a lawsuit the day after it occurs. You don't know if the lawyer said give this girl $50,000 and make her go away, otherwise your legal expenses are going to be more, or whether it was for $20 million. So you can't always take it in the mindset that, a settlement is an admission of guilt.
All right, well, thank y'all very much for watching. We're going to get a little bit more into the weeds next time we cover this in part 2 of Rodney Jones versus P. Diddy. Thank y'all for watching.